friends, welcome back to Cabin Quilters channel on YouTube. My name is Penny D'Amicis. Today I'm up in the studio making kits for our upcoming retreat, and we are going to be doing a project called the Design Wall Tote. Each year I come up with a small project. If we don't have a theme for our retreat, we have a small project that we can work on. It's an easy beginner project. It's designed to be something you can make very quickly. It's part of the retreat itself, so the kits are free. And this year's project was a Design Wall Tote. Sometimes it's nice and handy to have a little design wall with us. So I made this project specifically to go from class to class or retreat to retreat, and I thought you'd like to see it. Here is the project. It's our tiny little tote bag. See, we have a handle, we have a design wall on one side, and a little pocket tote on the other side. And if you're interested in seeing how we made this design, why don't you stick around? Hey gang, I'm so glad you stuck around to see how we made our Design Wall Tote bag today. And we'll take a look at its construction itself. So this, the construction of the tote is surrounded around a 16-inch piece of foam core board. This has sort of a paper on both sides with a foam in the middle, and our team laser cuts these to exactly 16 inches. You can see it there. If you're working on a 12-inch block or something like that, you have plenty of room to lay it all out on this board. The way that this is constructed, this is something you can create out of the size that's readily available, rather than having to cut it specifically to size. Today we're going to make the one around this guy right here, and I'm going to show you how this functions first off as a design wall, and then we'll get into the fabrics we need to make it. So step one is to show you exactly what it is that you're making. So remember, I showed you that on this side we have a handle and we have our little pocket where we can slip a ruler or our pattern that we're working on or whatever it is that you need. Just a small little pocket. Doesn't hold a lot, but it holds enough. The other side is our design wall, and here you go. Here is the white flannel part. I have 4 pieces on here for a block that I'm making that's nice and scrappy, and you can see I'm holding it upright. Haven't really done much to it other than just kind of wipe it onto the board. It's pretty good at holding the pieces on the board. What's really cool is when you're sitting at your sewing table at retreat or something like that, you can lean it up against a wall, or just however you need to put your pieces on and sort of stand back and look at it and make sure, especially if you're working with scrappy design, that you have your parts right where they need to be. The other cool thing about it is it doesn't weigh hardly anything at all. So if you have a command hook and a spot on a wall near your sewing machine, you can actually hang this up on the wall and have a tiny little design wall right by your sewing machine. So you can see what I mean by, if you're at your DIY store and you can't find one that's exactly 16 inches, you can actually make a hanging design wall that is for the space of your studio, and it doesn't have to cost a lot or weigh a lot, and you can put a couple little loops on the top of it and it'll hold right up on the wall, but you can take it with you. So this is how it works. This is what we're going to make. Let me show you what we need to make it. So I've already shown you that you need something that is stable inside of this bag in order to be able to have it hold its shape. Let's see what else we need. All right, gang, you can see here I have everything laid out in front of me to work on this project. So what I'm going to need are 3 fat quarters to start. My first fat quarter is going to be some sort of focus fabric, and in this case I've chosen these great butterflies. Now what I like about these butterflies is this is a focus fabric that has great color. It's got a great little look to it. I've chosen this teal print, but it's a tossed pattern. So what I want is color that I can coordinate with, but also I don't want to have to focus in my focus pattern on anything that has straight lines or directions or anything like that, because this is a very easy pattern. It's meant for beginners, and sometimes having to fussy cut fabric can make working with this project very difficult. We don't want to make it harder than it needs to be. So I've chosen this butterfly with this mint background. I have another piece of fabric here that is just that mint with a little bit of the colors in the butterfly, and then I have my white flannel. These are all fat quarters, and that's all we need to make my 16-inch kit as far as fabric goes. This piece right here is a 1 yard piece of Shape Flex, which is about 17 inches wide by 36 inches, and you're going to need this. Will keep the fabric inside both the front and the back of the bag a little bit stiffer and help it keep its shape. So we're going to use this. This is a cloth fabric if you're not familiar with Shape Flex, which is a Pellon product. This is just an iron-in stabilizer. So this side of the fabric feels like fabric, and this side is very rough, and it's got little glue dots on it. So this is meant to be fused inside of a piece of fabric, and it helps to layer the fabric so that it's just a little bit more stabilized. And then the last thing I have here is about an 18-inch piece of Heat and Bond, very thin, double-sided fusible, which we're going to use to close the whole thing up afterwards. I would recommend taking a hand stitch to it, but this will help keep it closed while we're working on our bag. So this we're just going to set aside, and let's start working on our project. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do with my bag is to go ahead and prep my fabric with the Shape Flex, because I want to cut all my pieces evenly, and in order to do that, I want to put my stabilizer on the backs of the pieces. Okay, so here are the parts to my bag. So obviously we know one side of the bag is going to be flannel, so I definitely want to add Shape Flex to my flannel side. Now let's look at the other side of the bag. I have two parts to the bag. I have the background part, which encompasses the handle, and then I have the pocket part. It doesn't really matter which fabric you use for which part, you're using the same amount of fabric. So you could make your background out of this fabric, you could make your pocket out of this fabric, you could make your handle. I made my handle out of the focus fabric on this bag and chose to use the coordinator as the pocket. I could have reversed that. You can also make, let's say I use this blue here for the background and I use the other one for the pocket, I could still make the handle out of this. Just the way that the fabric is cut and situated for this bag, you can choose to make your handle out of whatever. So in this case, I'm going to put my butterflies on as the pocket. So I'm going to set my butterflies aside, and I'm going to use my coordinating fabric, and these will be the two sides of the bag. So this is what I'm going to attach my Shape Flex to. So to start, I told you I had a 1 yard piece of Shape Flex. So let's take a look at that. I have my Shape Flex piece here. It is from the width of this fabric is about 17 inches. So I have a piece that's 17 inches by 36 inches. And what I want to do is cut it right down the center. So I'm just going to fold it in half, finger press a little seam in it, and then I'm going to open it up and just cut right there on the line. And then what I'm going to do is create two pieces of Shape Flex that are exactly the same size as my fat quarters. And then I'm going to adhere my Shape Flex to the back of each of my fat quarter pieces, the front of my bag and the back of my bag. And I'm going to leave the pocket for just a moment. All right, now I have adhered the Shape Flex to the back of my front and back of my bag. Here's a couple of notes. So it's easier to see it here on this teal piece. I told you that the Shape Flex fusible is about 17 inches wide, and we all know we cut it at a half yard, the half yard point. So it's going to be 18 inches this way and 17 inches in this direction. So the sides of the Shape Flex are going to match up with your fat quarter. You want to make sure that they match up really well so that you're not pressing that fusible down onto your ironing mat or anything like that. So we've done that. But one thing you might want to notice is they're not going to match up in the other direction, and that's because fabrics are different widths. So this fabric is a standard quilting cotton 44, 45 wide, and this guy is not that. So when I go to put this down, I'm going to have all of this extra space. So your natural tendency is to want to put your Shape Flex right in the center, and I would not do that. You want to shift it over away from the selvage, because we're going to actually cut a strap out of this piece, or even the other piece, depending on what we're doing for a pocket. And if you get it too close here and then you cut your part out of your shape flex, you're not going to have enough fabric to make that handle. Right now we have enough, a little bit left over to make a handle, and we can make this work. So we're going to cut this to size in a minute, and I just want to make sure that you have enough fabric here to do everything that you want to do with this piece. So I want to cut my fabric pieces, the end result, before I start putting them together in a bag. I want my pieces to be 17 inches by 18 inches. And 18 inches is a little bit bigger so that I can get this handle out. So I have some choices. Here's my 16-inch board. So I want one direction of my fabric to be 17 inches and the other direction of my fabric to be 18 inches. Well, luckily, if you can see here, my board is at 16. Luckily, my fabric is already a fat quarter, so it's sitting at 18 inches. This is not a directional fabric, so at this point, there's my 18-inch measurement. I just need to cut this side at 17 inches. So this works perfectly for me. I'm just going to trim this on the side, and then this leftover piece that I'm going to take off is going to become my handle to my bag. However, just a cautionary tale, if you're working with a directional fabric and you want it to go upright, the 18-inch measurement is the height of the bag. So let's say your print is going in this direction and you want the height of your bag in this direction. Well, that means you're going to have to cut in this direction. You'll cut at the 18-inch mark all the way across, and then you'll trim this side to 17 inches. Hopefully that makes sense. And definitely cut the side with the extra fabric first, because this becomes your handle and you don't want to short yourself on any fabric that you may need for your handle. So because this is not a directional fabric and it's already cut 18 inches in one direction, I can see it, looks pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and trim this one to 17, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my flannel, because my flannel's white and it doesn't really matter which direction that you cut it in. So let's get that one cut. And then I have plenty of fabric left over to make the handle to my bag. So I'm going to set this aside to be used later. So before I do anything else, I'm going to do myself a great big favor, and I'm going to put a wonder clip right in the center of the top of my bag, because I know this is 17 inches, this is 18 inches, and you know what? I'm already here at the cutting table. Everything's working out. So I'm just going to make myself a note and not even bother about worrying about this. This is definitely the top of my bag. All right, let's do the same thing with this guy. And I can tell where my fat quarter ends. There's my selvage for my flannel. So I'm going to lay this guy down. And as you can see, it is definitely 18 inches. So I'm just going to cut this one to 17. I'm going to do it exactly the same way I did with the back side of my bag. Just set this aside. I don't need it, but I'm going to set it aside anyway. And then I'm going to take a wonder clip and mark the top of my bag. I said I'm going to use this beautiful butterfly fabric for my pocket, so let's get going on that. Now, here is a really good opportunity for you to decide how big of a pocket you need. Our width of our bag, all of our other pieces are 17 inches. So we definitely need to cut this one the exact same width. And right now I have an 18-inch piece up here. I don't really need it to be 18 inches necessarily. I'm just going to go ahead and cut my pocket at 17. And actually I'm going to turn this because I have a really wonky side on this fat quarter. I didn't cut this side, so I just happened to notice that it's really wonky, so I'm just going to trim that while I'm thinking of it. That's better. We don't want any wonky projects. All right, so now I have my fat quarter laying in the other direction. And again, this is my pocket, and it doesn't really matter how big my pocket is, but let's lay out the board. So my 16-inch piece right here, if I were to lay this underneath, if I folded this a little past the selvage, my pocket would be pretty high up on the back of the board, and I'd see much more of my butterflies. I definitely don't want to sew in the selvage, so how about we trim the selvage, then we can get a good picture of what it is we're doing, because I know you can't see where I have it folded over here. So let's just lay this nice and flat, and we'll just trim the selvage only. And I'm just going to trim it at this nice straight line here at 21. So right now my fat quarter is exactly 18 by 21. So if I were to fold it in half, which is going to make our pocket, and that's exactly how we're going to do our pocket. We're going to fold our fabric in half and top stitch the top. But let's see, if I lay this right on the bottom of my board, let's see how far up my pocket comes. So it comes pretty far up the board, 3/4 of the way. If I'm going to put like a 12-inch ruler inside of this, I definitely want the pocket to be a little bit deeper. And because I'm using this focus fabric for the pocket, and this is going to be my coordinating fabric, I kind of like having a bigger pocket than not. So I'm definitely going to leave it like this. So I've folded my two parts together. I actually folded it on the 21-inch side so I could maintain as much depth of my pocket. So it's 18 inches this way. I need it to be 17 because remember, everything that I'm doing is 17 inches wide. So I'm just going to take an inch off of the side of this, luckily off that slightly wonky side. Throw that in my scrap bin. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this folded piece right over to my ironing board. I'm going to fold it in half nice so it's nice and even. I'm going to give it a really, really good press. And then I'm going to top stitch right along the top at 1/4 of an inch. And when I top stitch this, I'm actually going to elongate my stitch a little bit so it just looks a little bit nicer and a little bit more professional. And then I'll come back when that's done. All right, gang, I'm back. I've top stitched my pocket. Let's take a look. You can see I have pressed it nice and flat, and then I did a very wide elongated top stitch across the top at 1/4 of an inch. Now here's where the body of my bag goes together. This is pretty easy design. So you can see that I have the top of my bag here. I have a little clip. So I'm laying this right side up. This is the flannel side. This is the stabilizer side. And I'm going to lay my pocket also on that side. And this is right side up. So there's my top stitch across the top. And then I'm going to take my bag, my other side of my bag, there's my clip, and I'm going to put that one right side down, lining everything up on the bottom because I'm going to stitch this bag. I'm actually going to stitch it across the bottom first just to make sure that my layers stay in place, and then I'm going to stitch up both sides. But you could stitch at one side all the way down and around, and you're going to leave the spot with the clips open for now. So let's go ahead and reset our stitch length to default and stitch all the way around our bag, and then we'll come back. All right, gang, I'm back and I've sewn my project together. Let's look at it. So you can see that I still have my little clips at the top. I left them in there. This is what's open. So I've created a giant pocket inside, and I'm going to turn this right side out and fit it. One thing I didn't mention that I'm sure I'm going to get a question on is what size seam did I use to sew this together? I used 1/4 of an inch seam for construction. Remember, I left an inch of fabric all the way around, bigger than my board, and I did that on purpose. And then I'm going to take 1/4 inch seam off of either side of it, which leaves us with about a 1/2 inch clearance, and that's going to leave us enough room to be able to stuff that around the board. So that's why I chose that extra inch, but we did use 1/4 of an inch to seam it. And then I'm going to turn this right side out, but before I do that, I'm going to go here in the corner just for argument's sake, and I'm just going to clip a little bit of the bulk of this out of the corner, and being very careful not to hit the stitches, but just on those bottom two corners. Here's the top of my bag in the opening, and then I'm going to flip it inside out, and I'm going to hope I'm going to do something that will, well, it'll just kind of set us all off and go, oh my gosh, I must have done something wrong. And this is because my last retreaters did it, and it kind of freaked them out. And so I want to show you. So here I am, I've turned my bag inside out, and oh my gosh, I have my design wall here, but the pocket is on the wrong side. Actually, it isn't. It's just the way it was flipped. So I had a lot of retreaters that made it incorrectly. So I just reached inside the pocket and turned it right side out, and then you can see. So what happened is when I flipped all 3 layers, instead of flipping from the side that has the front, they flipped it from this side, and naturally the pocket went and kind of, because of weight, flipped onto the other side. So if that happens to you and you turn this inside out, you didn't do anything wrong. It just needs to be folded the other way. So, and all I did again was, rather than reaching inside the body, I just reached inside the pocket and turned it to the other side. You see that? So we're going to put it on the back side where it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to go into both the pocket and the inside with my little turning tool. And this could be whatever it is that you choose. It could be a purple thing. It could be a turning tool like this, a Hera marker, whatever you've got, you can use to poke out the little ends. So I'm just going to go into the corners on the inside of that opening and just poke the little corners in as best I can. And I don't have to get really picky with it. I just want to make sure that my board's going to fit into the bag really nicely. And then naturally, they kind of did the same thing with the pocket. So this is the opposite side of my bag. So here's the real test. I can take these little clips off now because I know where the top of my pocket is, or the top of my bag is. And then just to test it, before we go any further, let's insert our board. So I'm just going to go into the middle and slide it right in there. And look at that. Like a glove. Like a glove. It fits really nicely. So there it is right there. Now I have to add my handle. So I want to show you a little bit of what's happening here at the top. Now that my board is all the way in there, I have sort of 1 inch or so of fabric at the top. It should be about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. 1.5 inches. And I'm eventually going to fold this fabric right inside there, which is what's going to make the top front of the bag nice and taut. And then eventually this is actually going to get sort of miter folded, and I'm going to tuck that in there as well. So that's exactly how I'm going to do it. So let me demonstrate again, and it'll be just so what I'm doing is getting a measurement for where I'm going to put my little handle before I make it. So I'm going to smooth everything up. I'm going to make sure that my board is seated nicely in the bottom of this bag. And then I'm going to actually wrap the flannel around the board really taut so that it's nice on the front. I don't want any wrinkles or puckers or anything on the front. I'm going to wrap it really nice and taut. So do you see how I did that? And do you see when I tuck the flannel in around the board, naturally what happens is this fabric wants to fold in, kind of like wrapping a Christmas present. Do you see that? I kind of have like a little miter on the end. And then if you were wrapping a Christmas present, right, you would just fold this up and tape it. Except we're not going to do that because we're actually going to tuck this down inside the same pocket. So let's see if I can illustrate it this way. So I've turned my board over. Now you can see I have these little like fold parts. And then I'm going to tuck this down, fold it, and tuck it down inside the bag, just like I did with the flannel. Nice and neat. And right now we don't have to be super neat about it. We're just folding it so we can get an idea of where the top of our bag is going to be. So I'm folding it down nice and even at the top with the board. And then I can actually hit this right now with an iron. So I'm going to do that real quick. I just went over and I touched the top of this with an iron, and I did that on purpose so I can unfold it, and now I have this little line here of right where my bag is supposed to go. So what I'm going to do is create a handle, and then I'm going to attach the handle just inside here between the edge of the fabric and probably about 1/4 inch away from this crease line. So let's take our board back out of our bag because we don't need that in there, and let's make our handle. All right, let's make the handle of our bag, and I'm going to use the leftover piece of my back of my bag. You can see it has some shape flex on the back of it, which is great. If I can use the Shape Flex part, that's even better. So I'm going to trim, I'm going to leave this whole length the way it is, and I'm just going to trim this down to 3 inches wide. So leave the length, and what you want is a good 3-inch wide piece. To make the bag handle, I'm actually going to fold my piece. Let's do it this way so you can see it. I'm actually going to fold this in half, and I'm going to press it. And then when I come back, I'm going to press the points into it. So, and I'm sorry you can't see me actually using the iron. I'm really, studio space is limited today. So I've got a nice crease in the center. I'm actually going to take each side and fold it into the center. And you can do this with a finger press. You can do it with one of those press rollers if you have one. I have a brayer around here somewhere. I moved it. I don't know where it is. But I have one of those little plastic press rollers. You can do that too. And you're just going to fold each side in. And then what's going to happen is those two are going to get folded together, and you're going to have a handle. Okay? So I'm just going to take this right over to the ironing board and press those so you can see it. Let's look at our handle here. So I have pressed it in the center, right, just like that, and then I folded both raw edges into the center press line, just like that, and then folded it together, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is top stitch the bag handle closed on this side, and if you want it to look really nicely, I like to top stitch equally on the other side so they match, and that's really kind of a handy thought to do with any handle that you're doing. It just looks nicer if you do it on both sides. So I'm gonna go in a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch on this side and about 1/8 of an inch on this side, and top stitch them closed. All right, gang, I'm back with my handle. Here's my handle with that pretty top stitching down both sides. I really like the way that looks. Really, really, really like it. And it's very long. I've left it very long because, frankly, I don't know your life. I don't know what you want to do with this. So let me give you some thoughts here. So the handle that I have in the original bag, let's look at it. This was my first sample. So I have stitched the handle down at the fold, and I actually left mine pretty well long, but I put it to the outside of the bag. And the hazards of that are when I pull on it like this, do you see how it kind of twists? So the more you have going on over here, the further the lines are away from each other, the more it'll twist when you lift it. So, and I think I put them in about exactly, I want to say 3 inches from each side. So you don't have to do that. You could do that, but you don't have to do it the way I did it the first time. I think this time I'd like to bring the handle in a little closer. Now, when you bring a handle in a little closer and tighter, you're not leaving a lot of room for your hand to go in it. So I don't know if you're like me, I'm kind of a one-trip Wendy. So when I come in from the car or something like, I want to have every bag I have on my hands. I don't want to go back out to the car. So a lot of times I'll have my water jug and another bag handle, and so when I go to put my hand through this, I need to have some room to do that. So I wouldn't make it too narrow, but I'm not sure I would make it as wide as I did the first time. So I think maybe putting your handle in about like there. So let's measure that and see exactly how far away from the edge that is. So the outside of the handle I've got currently now at 5 inches on the outside of the bag. I think that's a pretty good distance. So I'm actually going to take and mark that with my marking pen. And I'm just measuring to the outside here. So this is about 5 inches right here. So I'm going to put a little mark there, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just put this at the 5-inch mark and mark it right there. So that's where I want the outside of my handle to be on this bag. So now I'm going to put my handle in there just like so and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's about how I want it to be. So that looks good. Well, now I know I want my bag handle to be on the inside of this part of the bag. So there's where my handle is. There's where my fold is. I'm going to turn it around, make sure it's not twisted, right? Don't get it twisted. So So let's clip this in here for right now just to hold it. Turn the handle this way, go inside, find my little 5-inch mark, put the handle in like that. And you can bring it up higher than what I'm doing if you want, but I just want to make sure that I get it in there really good. And then I'm going to go over and take my sewing machine, and I'm just going to make a sort of a rectangle around the strap and then an X through the center as neatly as possible, because this part is going to be on the outside of my bag. And you don't have to go all the way down here. If you want, you can make a tiny little X, whatever it is. So I'm going to go sew mine, but I'm going to do it right around where I'm away from, or I'm really at that seam allowance at the top, because that's what's going to get tucked in over that board. So remember I said this one's going to tuck in like this. It's going to kind of draw your eye in, and then this is going to fold in like that, and then we're going to seal that closed. So that's a really good spot to go ahead and put that handle. So I'm going to go ahead and put that handle in, and then I'm going to come back and show you what I did. I'm back with my handle on. Let's take a look at it. So you can see here, I've been very careful, very slow, and I sewed down along the bottom, back up, across the top is an X through the center, and that holds the weight. Also looks nice and neat, and I tried to do it pretty nice and neat on both sides, but you don't have to beat yourself up if it's not perfect, but do try. This is a good place to practice just stitching really slowly and mindfully so that it looks nice on both sides. And now my handle's in there, and then the only thing left to do is to close this puppy up. So let's do that. Let's stick our board back in, our project at the top. And the only thing we're going to do now is just make sure. So there are seams here on the side of this bag, and let's try to make sure that the seam allowance, we press to the dark. Well, in this case, let's tuck to the back. All right. And the reason we want to do that is because this white fabric will show every tiny little seam. So you can see I've tucked the seam to the back side, and it just makes it look a little bit nicer on the front, because after all, we're going to see the front more than we see the back. And then take your time and very slowly just push it down in there. It should push okay, but you've got all that handle business going on in the back, so just take your time and shimmy that board right on there. Okay, there you go. So you want to make sure that, again, you got your seam tucked to the bottom here, and push that board all the way in at the bottom. If you don't get it tucked exactly, it's fine, but you just want to make sure that it's nice and taut there at the bottom, all the way in there. And then I'm going to take and fold it to the top. Nice and even, nice and tight. Just like I said, tuck in your flannel, and then as you tuck in your flannel, your other side's going to naturally tuck, and it's going to look nice and neat. And then you can kind of tug on your handle a little bit, and looky there, it's all nice and closed at the top. So we just have to work a little bit on our corners, because we didn't tuck our corners. At least I didn't tuck my corner nice and neat on this side, and you got that little bit of bulk there from the seam. So that little spot right there is going to take a little bit of, we'll call it finagling, right there in the corner. This one, take a little finagling in that corner. So then the only thing left is to close this puppy up, and that is where our heat and bond comes into play. Now, heat and bond is going to do its best, but you have a handle on one side of this bag, so as you're pulling on it, you're actually tugging on that inside of that bag and trying to pull that seam apart. So just note that the heat and bond is going to do its best, but it's not going to be able to keep this thing closed forever. So I would say just a very light, careful whip stitch. You can even do it with a ladder stitch, and I have a video on my channel on how to do the ladder stitch, and you can ladder stitch this puppy closed, and that'll help hold it down. The ladder stitch is a great video if you don't know how to do that. It's a really easy stitch, and it makes everything look nice and neat, and you can't see the stitch. If you're a great whip stitcher, well then by all means whip stitch it shut. Now in my kit, have given myself way more of this than I needed. I actually only needed about probably 15.5 inches. So I'm just holding it up here to see how much I need. And then I'm going to take my scissors and just clip it off. There we go. I just need enough. And what I'm going to do with the heat and bond is to have lifted this back, and I'm going to lay the heat and bond in here just inside the seam, not right at the top. It'll look awful if you don't get it kind of covered and closed. But you're going to fold everything nice and neat back in on itself, and you're going to put that heat and bond strip right in there, just like that. There's a hair I'm trying to get out of there. We go. One of my hairs has made it onto the cutting table. And then tuck it nice. And then when you fold this back over, you're going to lay it right down on that heat and bond strip. And then what we're going to do is take it over to the iron and seal it shut. And that'll at least keep it closed long enough for you to get in there and just kind of stitch it shut. And then our bag will be done. So let's, I'm going to heat and bond this closed, and then we'll come back and take a look at it. Back, there is it closed with the heat and bond. Now sometimes heat and bond can be incredibly tricky, and if for some reason it doesn't work for you, you can use a glue, a fabric glue, to hold it together. Really what you're trying to do is just tack it shut until you can stitch it, because if you're going to put anything in it on the back of it, or carry a ruler with it or anything like that, you're definitely going to want to adhere those little joints better than just the heat and bond. But this is a finished project able to be used, put right on the wall. There's the back of it. Look how cute. I can put my 12-inch ruler in the back. I can slip the pattern that I'm working on in the back. And then I always know right where my ruler is and right where my pattern is. They're right here in the back. I wouldn't put too much stuff in the back of it, but looky there, it works just fine. And I can keep that closed. So I'm going to go back eventually and just cut mine and clip mine shut, but that is the Design Tote. What do I do if you go to the DIY store and you can't find a 16-inch piece of fabric or piece of board to make your own design wall? Well, you don't need to make yours exactly 16 inches. You can go and find whatever is available at your local DIY or your local craft store, and you can make it from that. So let's say you go to the store and you have a wider piece of wall that you can put a design wall on, and you want to make something a little bit bigger. Well, I think I was at the craft store the other day, and they have boards that are 18 by 24 or 24 by 36. So if you get something like that, or sometimes they're 2 foot by 4 foot, that's a 24 by 48 is like really popular. So you can do the same thing with that. Just keep in mind that whatever the width is and the height is, you're going to need an inch on either side for your board to fit inside once you make it, just with the same directions. You need an inch bigger than your board and 2 inches on the top, because you want enough room to be able to fold that under and attach it. And then you can always make yourself a handle, or you can make 2 handles if you want to. If it's a long board, then make yourself 2 smaller handles, and that way if you need to hook it up onto the wall, you can take 2 command hooks, put them on the wall, and put the hooks right on the little handle, and you have that on your wall. And then at any time that you want to take it and go somewhere, you just take it off the wall and take it somewhere. Now, I don't know is how I would make a 48-inch pocket on the back, but you get the idea. And if you like this little version, it's probably easy to find something that's 20 inches or something like that. If you need to make one, you just need to add yourself a little bit more fabric in order to do that. But if you like this little kit, you know, you can come to the Lake and Leisure Retreat and we'll have them all ready to go for you. All the kits available at Lake and Leisure, and you can always check on cabinquilters.com and see if we have any over there. We haven't quite figured out how to ship these little boards yet, but if we figure it out, we'll put them on the website too. So I hope you learned something today. I hope you enjoy our little Design Wall Tote bag. If you like the video, just, you know, give it a thumbs up. Let Facebook, or let YouTube know that you really, not Facebook, let YouTube know that you really like this channel. It's been a long week, I'm just telling you. Also consider subscribing. And you know, if you're interested in making your own design wall tote with me at the Lake and Leisure Retreat, go to cabinquilters.com and look up Lake and Leisure Quilt Retreats in North Carolina, and we'd be happy to have you as a guest. And until next time, enjoy your design wall and happy quilting.